Welcome to InfoStream, your daily current. Unsure what to listen to? Turn to us for today's headlines. Stay informed. Russia's strikes cause casualties and damage in Ukraine. Intense international pressure isolates Israel. Iran faces renewed sanctions due to nuclear concerns. Venezuela prepares for heightened U.S. tensions. Lavrov criticizes Western actions and NATO threats. Thailand accuses Cambodia of ceasefire violations. Canada capitalizes on H-1B visa changes. Trump orders troop deployment in Portland. Leaders meet over potential government shutdown. Shooting and fire in Southport results in fatalities. Multiple victims hospitalized after Michigan church incident. At least 40 dead at Tamil Nadu political rally. Government supports Jaguar Land Rover with a $1.5 billion loan. Labor proposes new town development. Record stock holdings raise economic worries. Devastating Russian strikes across Ukraine resulting in casualties and damage. A prolonged and intense Russian aerial bombardment, lasting over 12 hours, inflicted significant casualties and widespread damage across Ukraine, primarily targeting the capital, Kiev. The attack, involving nearly 600 drones and dozens of missiles directed at 7 regions, represents one of the most substantial barrages in recent months. At least 4 individuals were confirmed dead, including a 12-year-old girl in Kiev, and over 70 sustained injuries across the country. The assault commenced late Saturday evening with persistent air raid sirens, accompanied by anti-aircraft fire and explosions. Ukrainian authorities urge residents to seek shelter utilizing the country's Air Alert app. Damage extended to civilian infrastructure, including the Institute of Cardiology in Kyiv, resulting in the deaths of a nurse and a patient. Furthermore, a bakery, an automobile rubber factory, and numerous apartment buildings were targeted. Across the country, the assault impacted Zaporizhia, Khmelnytsky, Sumy, Mykolaiv, Chernihiv, and Odessa, with Zaporizhia reporting 34 injuries, including 3 children. One boy suffered an explosion and another carbon monoxide poisoning, both in serious condition. In Sumy, a 59-year-old man died from strike damage. President Volodymyr Zelensky condemned the attack as vile and vowed Ukrainian retaliation, aiming to force diplomatic engagement from Russia. He called for a strong response from Europe and the U.S., echoing U.S. President Donald Trump's recent suggestion of harsher sanctions against Russia. Trump's shift in position, acknowledging Ukraine's potential to retake lost territory, coincided with the attack. Zelensky emphasized the timing of the assault, occurring at the conclusion of the UN General Assembly, as indicative of Russia's true intentions. The ongoing conflict continues to fuel calls for increased international pressure on Russia, with a focus on curbing Russian oil and gas imports. The intensifying international pressure on Israel, a growing isolation. Recent news highlights a significant escalation in international condemnation and sanctions directed at Israel, primarily stemming from the ongoing conflict in Gaza. Multiple reports detail the expanding diplomatic and economic isolation faced by the country, driven by the humanitarian crisis and Israel's military actions. The BBC reported on escalating Israeli strikes in Gaza, resulting in dozens of civilian deaths, including many women and children. These strikes, part of a broader ground offensive focused on Gaza City, occurred alongside a deepening international backlash. Simultaneously, the CNN article underscored the worsening diplomatic situation, detailing the suspension of trade agreements with Israel by the European Union and the imposition of targeted sanctions by various Western nations. This pressure is fueled by the UN's investigation into potential war crimes and the growing number of countries recognizing a Palestinian state. A key element of this pressure is the legal challenge brought by Liam Heightened, a member of the Irish rap group Kneecap, whose terrorism prosecution was dismissed. Heightened argued that the charges were brought too late, asserting the case was fundamentally about Gaza. This legal action further underscores the perceived connection between Israel's actions in Gaza and the broader international condemnation. The United Nations General Assembly witnessed further diplomatic shifts, with several Western nations formally recognizing a Palestinian state. Furthermore, a report analyzed UN General Assembly votes between 2017 and 2025, revealing a decline in the number of countries abstaining from resolutions related to Israel. This trend indicates a growing discomfort among some long-standing allies. The Israeli government, led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, acknowledges the mounting international pressure and has responded by exploring strategies for greater self-reliance, including bolstering its domestic defense industry. However, Netanyahu's attempts to downplay concerns about isolation have been met with continued skepticism. The situation is further complicated by ongoing legal challenges, including the ICC's investigation and the potential arrest warrants against Netanyahu. Despite these challenges, the United States remains a steadfast supporter of Israel, signaling a continued divergence in strategic perspectives. The overall picture paints a picture of Israel facing an unprecedented level of diplomatic, economic, and legal scrutiny, driven by the events unfolding in Gaza. Iran sanctions reimposed following nuclear escalation. Following a decade since their initial removal, sweeping United Nations economic and military sanctions have been reimposed on Iran, triggered by what European powers and the United States deem continued nuclear escalation and a lack of cooperation from the Islamic Republic. The move, enacted through the snapback mechanism, represents a significant setback to the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, a landmark international agreement designed to limit Iran's nuclear activities in exchange for sanctions relief. The sanctions were reinstated after Iran suspended inspections of its nuclear facilities, a legally mandated obligation under the JCPOA. This suspension occurred following recent Israeli and U.S. aerial attacks on several Iranian nuclear sites and military bases in June. European Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper, alongside her French and German counterparts, strongly urged Iran to avoid escalatory action, highlighting the gravity of the situation. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian refuted accusations of developing nuclear weapons, asserting no intention to pursue such a path. The sanctions are a direct response to Iran's increased nuclear activity following Donald Trump's withdrawal from the JCPOA in 2018, a decision persistently criticized as flawed. The recent attacks, intended to reverse Iran's nuclear progress and punish its support for regional proxies, have fundamentally altered the geopolitical landscape, rendering international support for the original deal obsolete, according to Iranian officials. While the US and Israel claim the attacks caused monumental damage, the extent of their impact on Iran's nuclear program remains disputed. The situation underscores a heightened level of tension and uncertainty surrounding Iran's nuclear ambitions and the future of international efforts to prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons. Venezuela mobilizes civilians amid rising U.S. tensions. As tensions escalate between the United States and Venezuela, President Nicolas Maduro has ordered the mobilization of civilian militias, primarily comprised of senior citizens and volunteers, in response to perceived threats from the U.S. Navy. This action follows the U.S. Navy's deadly strikes against Venezuelan boats suspected of transporting drugs to the U.S., resulting in the deaths of at least 17 individuals. Maduro declared these actions a non-declared war by the U.S., prompting the activation of the National Bolivarian Militia, established by Hugo Chavez in 2009. The militia's training exercises, taking place in neighborhoods like Pater and 23 de Enero, focus on familiarizing participants with weapons, including Russian-made rifles, and simulating defensive strategies. These groups, historically used for bolstering political rallies, are now being tasked with responding to what Maduro views as a potential U.S. invasion. The U.S. Navy's deployment in the South Caribbean, while substantial, is not considered a full-scale invasion plan. However, the U.S.'s refusal to recognize Maduro's re-election and its designation of the Tren de Aragua gang as a terrorist group have further strained relations. The U.S. has offered a $50 million reward for information leading to Maduro's capture. The Venezuelan military, specifically the National Bolivarian Armed Forces, SAFA-MB, is also involved in training the militias. Public sector workers have reportedly been pressured into joining, and the militia's role extends beyond rallies, now including defensive training. Maduro's government is attempting to project an image of strength and resistance against the perceived U.S. threat. The situation highlights a significant deterioration in U.S.-Venezuela relations, fueled by accusations of drug trafficking involvement and disputed election results. The mobilization of civilian militias represents a deliberate escalation by Maduro's government, seeking to deter potential aggression and solidify its authority amidst growing international pressure. The training exercises are a visible demonstration of Venezuela's preparedness in the face of what it considers an imminent threat. Lavrov dismisses NATO threats, criticizes Western actions. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov delivered a forceful speech at the UN General Assembly, asserting Russia's lack of intention to attack NATO or EU member states, while simultaneously condemning Western actions in Ukraine, Gaza, and the Middle East. Lavrov repeatedly dismissed accusations of planning an attack on NATO, stating President Putin had debunked such provocations, and that Russia's intentions remained unchanged. He emphasized that any aggression against Russia would trigger a decisive response. The conflict in Gaza remains a central point of contention, with Lavrov strongly denouncing the brutal killings of Palestinians and criticizing Israel's actions. He highlighted Israel's use of its operation to eliminate Hamas as justification for attacks on other Middle Eastern countries, specifically mentioning Qatar. Tensions remain high due to Russia's ongoing invasion of Ukraine, now in its third year, marked by recent large-scale drone attacks. Donald Trump has advocated for NATO nations to shoot down Russian planes, and the alliance has vowed to utilize all necessary tools to defend itself. Lavrov also addressed the situation regarding airspace incursions, following incidents in Denmark and accusations of Russian warplanes violating Estonian airspace, alongside a recent NATO air defense mission over Poland. Denmark attributed the drone incursions to a professional actor, without implicating Russia. Furthermore, Lavrov criticized the timing of recent recognition of a Palestinian state by countries like the UK and France, suggesting it was motivated by a desire for a region devoid of any viable options. He expressed concerns about the current U.S. administration's approach to the Ukrainian crisis, noting a desire for pragmatic cooperation without ideological constraints. The conflict in Gaza has resulted in at least 926 deaths, according to Hamas's health ministry, and 200 killed and 251 taken hostage in the initial attacks. The situation continues to escalate, prompting international condemnation and calls for a ceasefire. Thailand accuses Cambodia of deceptive tactics and ceasefire violations. Thai Foreign Minister Sihasak Phuangketkeow delivered a strongly worded address to the United Nations General Assembly, accusing Cambodia of deceptive behavior, provocative actions, and continued violations of the ongoing ceasefire agreement. Responding to Cambodian Deputy Prime Minister Sokhon Prak's allegations regarding the eviction of Cambodian civilians from land claimed by Thailand, Sihasak refuted the claims, asserting that the villages in question are firmly within Thai territory. He highlighted Thailand's historical role in providing refuge to Cambodian civilians fleeing the civil war in the 1970s, emphasizing that the expansion of these villages occurred despite repeated Thai protests. Sihasak presented a stark contrast between his previous discussions with Cambodian Foreign Minister on the previous day, focusing on peace and mutual trust, and Sokhon Prak's public statements. He criticized the Cambodian government for distorting the truth and fabricating accusations, pointing to instances of alleged forced evictions and the deployment of surveillance drones within Thai territory. He underscored the tangible consequences of these actions, citing the loss of Thai soldiers' limbs due to landmines and attacks on civilian areas, including a grocery store struck by Cambodian rocket fire. The Thai foreign minister expressed deep concern over Cambodia's alleged mobilization of civilians and the use of weaponry, viewing these actions as direct breaches of Thailand's sovereignty and the established ceasefire. Sihasak emphasized that Thailand has consistently prioritized peace and has actively contributed to Cambodia's reconstruction efforts following the 1991 Paris peace agreements, including the construction of infrastructure. However, he questioned the genuine intentions of the Cambodian government regarding peaceful coexistence, expressing skepticism about their commitment to shared peace initiatives. Ultimately, Sihasak reaffirmed Thailand's dedication to safeguarding its territorial integrity and upholding its sovereignty, while advocating for a peaceful resolution to the ongoing dispute. Canada seizes opportunity amid H-1B visa changes. Recent changes to the U.S. H-1B visa program, specifically the increase in application fees to $100,000, are presenting a significant opportunity for Canada to attract skilled workers previously reliant on this program. U.S. President Donald Trump's decision has created a void, leaving many highly educated foreign workers, including Canadians, seeking alternative employment options. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney acknowledged this shift during a speech before the Council of Foreign Relations in New York, noting the outflow of Canadian talent to the U.S. He expressed a desire to retain a portion of this talent pool. The increased fees are expected to disproportionately impact recent international graduates of U.S. universities who had hoped to pursue long-term careers in the United States. Legal challenges to the policy are anticipated. While current H-1B visa holders in the U.S. will not be immediately affected, the changes are likely to restrict opportunities for foreign workers. Responding to this shift, Canadian organizations are urging the government to act swiftly. Evan Green, a Canadian-based immigration lawyer, views the situation as a wonderful opportunity for Canada. Build Canada, a nonprofit focused on productivity growth, released a memo advocating for immediate action, highlighting Canada's strengths: world-class research institutions, similar time zones, proximity to the U.S., and a high quality of life. Data indicates that 1% of total H-1B applicants in 2019 were Canadian, suggesting a considerable number of skilled professionals could be drawn to Canada. The memo from Build Canada estimates that hundreds of thousands of highly skilled and highly paid H-1B professionals are now seeking new homes. This presents a strategic advantage for Canada, capitalizing on the disruption caused by the U.S. policy changes and leveraging its existing competitive advantages. The Canadian government is now positioned to strategically welcome these individuals, bolstering its workforce and further enhancing its reputation as a premier destination for talent. Trump authorizes troop deployment in Portland amidst heightened tensions. President Donald Trump has authorized the deployment of U.S. troops to Portland, Oregon, marking a significant escalation in his administration's use of military force to address ongoing protests and perceived threats related to immigration enforcement. This action follows a previous deployment in Los Angeles and reflects a broader strategy aimed at confronting what Trump characterizes as a domestic terrorist network. The deployment is directed by Secretary of War Pete Hegseth and is intended to protect immigration and customs enforcement (ICE) facilities, particularly those targeted by protesters, often associated with the anti-fascist movement, Antifa. Trump has repeatedly described Portland as war-ravaged and characterized protesters as professional agitators and anarchists. He has also designated Antifa as a major terrorist organization, fueling concerns about potential overreach and the suppression of dissent. This move comes amidst heightened tensions following a deadly shooting at an ICE facility in Texas, where a detainee fatally wounded 2 agents before taking his own life. The incident, along with the death of conservative activist Charlie Kirk, has prompted Trump to intensify his rhetoric surrounding domestic terrorist activity. Oregon Governor Tina Kotek expressed concern and sought clarification from the White House, emphasizing the safety and calmness of her state's communities. Senator Ron Wyden strongly condemned the deployment as an authoritarian takeover and urged Oregonians to resist Trump's attempt to incite violence. The deployment is not without legal challenges, with the city government attempting to limit federal involvement through zoning violations and other legal means. Concerns have been raised about the potential for federal agents to engage in widespread surveillance and the impact on civil liberties. The situation mirrors similar deployments in Los Angeles, where a legal dispute over presidential authority continues. The administration's strategy appears to be driven by a desire to demonstrate decisive action against perceived threats and to consolidate support among conservative voters. The long-term implications of this strategy remain uncertain, but it undoubtedly represents a significant escalation in the administration's approach to domestic unrest. Top leaders meet amid shutdown threat. As a looming government shutdown approaches due to expiring funding, top congressional leaders, including House Speaker Mike Johnson, Senate Majority Leader John Thune, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, are scheduled to meet with President Donald Trump at the White House on Monday. This meeting comes after Trump abruptly canceled a previously planned meeting with Schumer and Jeffries, deeming their demands unserious and ridiculous. The decision followed consultations with Johnson and Thune, who voiced opposition to a potential deal with the Democrats. Despite Republican control of Capitol Hill and the White House, the passage of a spending package requires at least 7 Democratic votes in the Senate. Schumer is insisting that any funding bill include an extension of Enhanced Affordable Care Act premium subsidies, alongside several other key provisions to secure Democratic support. Republicans, however, are advocating for a 7-week funding extension with additional funds for security measures across government branches. The potential for a protracted shutdown is significant, with Trump and the White House Office of Management and Budget reportedly considering alternative strategies, such as downsizing agency workers in programs aligned with the president's priorities. This approach echoes Trump's tactics during a previous shutdown in 2018, which lasted 35 days, the longest on record. The meeting marks a crucial step in negotiations, representing the first time Schumer and Trump have spoken since Trump's second term began, and the first in-person meeting between Jeffries and the president. Schumer's proactive outreach, including a call to Thune, highlights the urgency of the situation. The possibility of a prolonged shutdown underscores the deep divisions between the parties and the potential for significant disruption to government operations. The outcome of this meeting will be pivotal in determining whether a resolution can be reached before the funding deadline. 3 dead, multiple injured in Southport waterfront shooting. A shooting occurred Saturday evening at a waterfront bar in Southport, North Carolina, resulting in 3 fatalities and multiple injuries. A 40-year-old man, Nigel Edge, is currently in custody and facing multiple murder and assault charges following the incident. Edge allegedly opened fire from a boat at the American Fish Company at the Southport Yacht Basin around 21:10:30 local time, subsequently fleeing towards the intracoastal waterway and being apprehended by the U.S. Coast Guard near Oak Island, approximately half an hour later. Authorities believe the attack was premeditated and that Edge acted alone. At least 8 individuals sustained injuries, with 1 victim reportedly clinging to life. The victims appear to include out-of-town visitors enjoying live music at the waterfront deck. Investigations are ongoing, and further charges are possible. Southport, a small coastal community of nearly 4,000 residents, has been deeply impacted by the tragedy. The shooting highlights a concerning trend of gun violence impacting seemingly safe public spaces. As of late October, the U.S. has experienced at least 320 mass shootings this year, defined as incidents involving 4 or more victims, excluding the shooter. City officials, including Public Information Officer Cheyenne Ketchum and Police Chief Todd Coring, are cooperating fully with law enforcement. North Carolina Governor Josh Stein expressed his heartbreak and offered state support. The shooting underscores the vulnerability of even idyllic communities to violent crime. The investigation is focused on determining a motive, though no known further credible threats have been identified. Edge is scheduled to appear in court on Monday and is being held without bond. Authorities are working to identify the victims and notify their families. Southport is located near the mouth of the Cape Fear River, approximately 30 miles south of Wilmington. The community is rallying together to support those affected by this horrific event. The Coast Guard and American Fish Company were contacted for comment. Multiple victims hospitalized following shooting and fire at Michigan Church. A devastating incident unfolded in Grand Blanc, Michigan, today involving a shooting and subsequent fire at a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints building. Initial reports indicate multiple individuals were injured as a result of the attack, prompting a swift response from law enforcement and federal agencies. Attorney General Pam Bondi was among the first to publicly address the situation, sharing that she was receiving ongoing briefings regarding the horrific events. She emphasized the gravity of the situation, stating that the FBI and ATF were collaborating with local authorities to investigate the circumstances surrounding the attack. FBI Director Kash Patel also issued a statement on the social media platform X, confirming the agency's involvement in tracking reports of the shooting and fire. Patel underscored the unacceptable nature of violence within a place of worship, characterizing the event as cowardly and criminal. Both Bondi and Patel extended their prayers and support to the victims and their families, acknowledging the profound sadness and shock caused by this tragedy. The investigation is currently underway, with authorities working to determine the motive behind the attack and identify any potential suspects. Details regarding the number of casualties and the extent of the injuries remain unclear, but officials are prioritizing the care of the victims and the securement of the crime scene. The incident has sparked widespread concern and outrage, and authorities are urging the public to cooperate with the investigation. The focus remains on providing assistance to those affected and ensuring the safety of the community. Tragic political rally crush in Tamil Nadu claims at least 40 lives. A devastating incident unfolded in Tamil Nadu, India, on Saturday, resulting in the deaths of at least 40 individuals at a political rally organized for actor-turned-politician Vijay. The event, held in the Karur district, quickly spiraled into a chaotic crush as a crowd exceeding double the originally requested 10,000 people surged forward. Initial reports indicated a significant number of casualties, including at least 9 children, 17 women, and 13 men. Furthermore, 51 individuals sustained injuries and are receiving treatment in local hospitals. Police have initiated a criminal investigation, filing charges against 3 senior members of Vijay's TVK party, potentially encompassing homicide and negligent conduct. The incident occurred while Vijay was addressing the rally, prompting a temporary halt to his speech due to the overwhelming crowd. Local media reported a substantial delay in the event's proceedings. Witnesses described scenes of widespread fainting and a desperate struggle for space within the densely packed crowd. Tamil Nadu Chief Minister M.K. Stalin announced a compensation of 1 million rupees $308,400 for the families of the deceased and pledged an inquiry into the circumstances surrounding the tragedy. The emotional impact of the event was evident in Vijay's online statement, expressing his profound sorrow and offering condolences to the grieving families and prayers for the injured. Prime Minister Narendra Modi also commented on the unfortunate and deeply saddening event, posting his sentiments on X. This incident joins a concerning trend of deadly crowd crushes in India, with similar tragedies occurring recently at the Kumbh Mela Hindu festival and outside a cricket stadium. The investigation is ongoing, and authorities are examining factors contributing to the catastrophic surge, highlighting the challenges of crowd management within the context of large political gatherings. The focus remains on providing support to the victims' families and determining the root causes of this devastating loss of life. Government guarantees 1.5 billion loan to support Jaguar Land Rover amid cyber shutdown, and Jaguar Land Rover JLR has secured a 1.5 billion loan guarantee from the government to mitigate the impact of a prolonged cyber shutdown on its operations and protect its extensive supply chain. Business Secretary Peter Kyle announced the measure, facilitated through a commercial bank aimed at safeguarding approximately 30,000 direct employees and the wider 100,000 individuals employed within JLR's supply chain, predominantly located in the West Midlands and Merseyside. The cyber attack, occurring at the end of August, has halted JLR's production for several weeks, raising serious concerns about the financial stability of numerous small businesses that supply exclusively to the car manufacturer. This represents the first time a company has received government assistance directly resulting from a cyber attack. The loan's purpose is to provide suppliers with financial certainty during the disruption, as production is not expected to resume at JLR's UK facilities until at least October 1st. JLR typically produces around 1,000 vehicles daily across its Solihull, Wolverhampton, and Halewood plants. The shutdown is estimated to be costing the company at least $50 million per week. The loan will be repaid over 5 years, bolstering JLR's cash reserves and addressing the backlog of payments owed to suppliers. JLR has ceased placing orders with its 700 suppliers, and some smaller firms have indicated they may only have 1 week of operational funding remaining. The Export Development Guarantee, EDG, will underpin the loan, supporting UK companies engaged in international trade. This intervention highlights the significant economic vulnerability created by the cyber attack and underscores the government's commitment to supporting key industries and their dependent businesses. The situation is dynamic, with ongoing efforts to resolve the security breach and restore production. Labour pledges new towns development ahead of election. The Labour Party has announced a plan to begin construction of 3 new towns, alongside 12 other development sites, before the next general election, aiming to address the housing crisis and stimulate economic growth. The initiative, spearheaded by Housing Secretary Steve Reed, draws inspiration from post-war Labour government policies and the creation of towns like Stevenage and Crawley. Reed, recounting his family's experience with factory closures, highlighted his driving mission to rebuild communities and emphasized a commitment to replicating the success of the Attlee government's New Towns program. Supporters sported Build Baby Build hats during the party conference, demonstrating the party's focus on construction. The New Towns Task Force has identified 12 potential locations, including Adlington in Cheshire East, a corridor in South Gloucestershire, Cruise Hill in Enfield, Hayford Park in Oxfordshire, the South Bank area of Leeds, Victoria North in Manchester, Tempsford in Bedfordshire, Thamesmead in South East London, and Worcestershire Parkway. Each proposed development will include at least 10,000 homes, with a target of collectively building 300,000 homes across England over several decades. A key element is ensuring at least 40% of new homes are affordable. A New Towns unit will manage public and private sector funding for essential infrastructure like GP surgeries, schools, green spaces, libraries, and transport. Development corporations will be tasked with wielding special planning powers, including compulsory purchase and granting planning permission, mirroring the regeneration of Stratford after the 2012 Olympics. Concerns have been raised by local residents, such as those in Tempsford, regarding a lack of communication and transparency surrounding the plans. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer is keen to use the party conference to showcase Labour's achievements, emphasizing the party's commitment to overcoming obstacles and preventing home ownership from becoming a distant dream. The initiative represents a significant investment and a return to a long-standing Labour policy aimed at reshaping England's towns and communities. Record stock holdings raise economic concerns. A significant portion of American households now hold record levels of stock investments, prompting economists to express caution regarding potential economic instability. According to Federal Reserve data, direct and indirect stock holdings account for 45% of household financial assets, the highest level ever recorded in the second quarter. This surge in stock ownership is fueled by historically high market valuations, increased participation by individual investors, and the rising popularity of retirement plans invested in stocks. However, this elevated exposure presents considerable risks. The concentration of wealth in stocks makes the economy more vulnerable to market downturns, a concern highlighted by experts like Jeffrey Roach of LPL Financial and John Higgins of Capital Economics. The impact of a market correction would be amplified due to the substantial influence of the stock market on the overall economy. The S&P 500 has rallied significantly, achieving 33% growth since April 8th and 13% growth since January 1st, largely driven by the magnificent 7 tech stocks Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, Meta, Microsoft, Nvidia, and Tesla. These companies account for roughly 41% of the S&P 500's gains this year. Despite investor benefits, this concentration raises concerns about over-reliance on a few dominant firms. Furthermore, foreign investors also hold a record high share of U.S. stocks, exacerbating the issue. Economists warn that historically high stock ownership increases the likelihood of a downturn and potentially reduces average returns going forward. The situation is further complicated by a K-shaped economy, where wealth is increasingly concentrated among the wealthiest Americans, while lower-income individuals struggle. The robust stock market is boosting the net worth of the wealthy, leading to increased spending and fueling economic growth, but this contrasts with the economic realities faced by many Americans. Data indicates that the top 10% of earners accounted for over 49% of consumer spending in the second quarter, the highest level since 1989. This divergence is creating distortions in economic data, painting a rosier picture than many Americans experience. The risk of a protracted market downturn is increasing, potentially impacting household spending and the psychology of wealthier investors. The economy's reliance on the stock market's performance is growing, creating a heightened vulnerability to economic shifts.